Okay, so we are going to do a video first this week. We are replying to a comment left by one wonderful person who wanted to ask about the best way to blend instruments and like specifically guitars. I think it's a great thing to be aware of because essentially I think that the more things you add to a track, the harder it is to blend. But more than that, what happens is like every element needs its own piece of the frequency spectrum. So like the bass you want to be in a certain spot, the drums you want to take up a certain spot, different parts of the frequency spectrum. So like the kick might be well down low, but the cymbals and the top of a snare might be higher up. You know, the vocals in a certain spot, the piano's in a certain spot. And it's really important to think about that when you're making music. You don't want a ton of the low stuff. You don't want a ton of like really massive synths and really massive bass parts and really massive pianos, because that's all going to compete for the same space, and what's going to happen is your mix is going to sound like shit. It's just going to sound like too many things competing for the same space, and really they're not going to blend well, and you sort of have to prioritize one over the other. So it's something to be aware of for sure. And I'm biasedly going to open up Dead to Me, which I know we have looked at one time on stream, but definitely not as in depth as we're going to go right now. So let's just jump straight in. So importantly here, to me it sounds a bit like a wall of sound, but in a nice way. There's elements up top that sort of stay as pedal tones. The bass is really gritty and poking through in a nice way. The guitars are wide. There's some harmonic stuff going on in like the mid-range that I like. And the vocal kind of sits on top and just glides with the whole thing. So drums, Superior Drummer, that doesn't need too much explanation. Jump into my other videos if you want to see more on the drums. But let's jump into the bass part specifically. So for the lows, I just went with an 808. Really standard, not much on that. But the great thing is that does what it says on the tin. It's low end, it's sub, that's sorted. Like I can trust that. And I think it was probably New Era 808 sampler, which I've shown you guys a few times. It's a contact instrument. It's great. So let's look into like the live bass. So that's really interesting to me because basically I've chopped off the low end of the bass. Because the 808 is there, I don't really need the low end. I don't need the sub, and we don't want those to clash. So that bass part, we're kind of pushing around 700 to 1K. And to be honest, that's the piece of a bass guitar I really like. It's the more sort of aggressive sounding piece that's going to come through in a smaller speaker. And to jump in that concept for a second is it's often easy to make a song that you think is great and you love the bass line and it sounds really good in the speakers or in the headphones or whatever. And then you jump into a car or on a small system, you're like, where the hell's the bass gone? And that's because you've ignored what I call like small speaker bass. And you really want a piece of the bass that's playing the same notes that's going on really, really low, but is higher in the frequency spectrum. So when that pokes through, it hints at the lower piece that's playing that you might not be able to hear. And your mind goes, okay, there is bass there. And you hear the way the bass moves. So for us, we've just, because the 808's down there, we don't need the lows. Let's just use this as our small speaker bass, but give it grit, give it size, give it everything that we would give to a normal bass part. So we're poking through a lot of that 700 to 1K, gives it that grit. So listen with it, without it. Gives it a lot of grit and pushes through in like a way that isn't harsh too, which I really like. Now we're heavily limiting it, so it just basically makes sure that piece stays at a certain level throughout. We've also got kickstart going, which is basically side chaining it so it gets out of the way on the fourth notes like that. And then what we're doing is we're adding a bit of punch to it, just a little bit of punch. It's another bass line. And together they just sound a bit chunkier, a bit more aggressive. We could have used a transient designer, but I often think adding another part that's just shorter is a better way of achieving the sound you're going for. Because a transient designer sometimes just, to me, sounds a bit like, either sounds a bit clicky or just does never really sound like the real thing unless you've got the perfect sound for it to work on. So that's our bass part. Let's jump into the low end guitars here, because these are one of my favorite pieces. yeah, so I like these because, again, we've just chopped off the low end, right? Like, we don't need anything under 200 because the bass has sorted that. We got the 808, we got the piece on top of it. I want them really, really wide, and sometimes low end in the wide speakers feels weird, and you kind of want your low end to be mono. So we just said get rid of it and make it super wide, make it super aggressive and distorted. This is a really standard plugin. It's just Waves, E-channel, SSL emulation. It sounds amazing. There's a guitar preset, which is just really, really standard in here. Check this out. You literally just go to this. And once you've got it, tweak some stuff and find that frequency again. I found 1.3K where the guitar sounds like aggressive and like powerful, but it doesn't sound harsh. And I've just pushed that even more to kind of really fill out that frequency spectrum, saying, hey, this is the bass. This is where the bass is going to occupy. And then we got, as I said, left and right, hard panned. We are just, what are we doing here? We're actually adding 300. So a bit more of that like fake low end in the sides, are we? Or are we just adding it overall? We're adding it overall. And then again, kickstart to make it bounce, and then a limiter and probably a little bit more EQ just to make sure we have certain things. Yeah, so that's where the harshness would be. So listen, so well, that's not very helpful, but check this out. Yeah. So I've just decided, look, you know what, that's a bit harsh. We don't need that piece of the frequency spectrum. That's also where the vocal's probably going to be. Let's take it out. So that's that part of the guitar. Now let's listen to the harmonic guitar. So let's play the low end and let's play this. So it's literally just something carrying on the whole time. It's a pedal tone, but when it's all together, to me it sounds really nice, and it just makes it sound massive when it comes in, that something stays when the bass changes. That's where the emotion exists in an instrumental. And I think when an instrumental inspires you, you're in a really good place to write a song. So this is really important. I mean, literally that's it. That's the whole part. Again, just kind of baking everything together. Virtual Mix Rack by Slate. Just a great like tone shaping EQ type thing. Again, we probably had some harshness that we wanted to get rid of, so Soothe is great for that. It's quite good at being transparent. You can definitely tell when something's got Soothe on it, but it's not like a really bad digital sound. It's kind of just like a slightly muffled sound. And then we've got a limiter, just making sure everything is nicely stacked together. So now we have that. Let's just see what we have next. Okay, my favorite part. Yeah, so now we have the bass. We have the harmonic sort of pedal tone that's carrying on throughout. We just need to add the harmonic content that adds a tiny bit more emotion. The middle piece, right? We got the low locked. We got the high end pedal tony stuff. Now what's in the middle? Where's the harmonic content? Where's, like, if you're singing a BV, that's where it's going to be. So let's just listen to this. So together, that's like a choir of guitars, and then the bass with the harmonic piece. See, I love this piece. And so this was just played, you know, electric guitar, just kind of noodling around, trying to find, okay, where does the emotion hit here? And just found that one spot, dun 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 dun, literally there. And we just probably used similar plugins, Virtual Mix again, just to make it, give it that sort of bit of aggression probably. Let's just have a listen. Yeah. So much more aggression, just helps with the distortion. Noise gate, just to get rid of anything that crept through when it wasn't playing. Kickstart, just to, again, give that side chain so it gets out of the way when certain elements are playing in the drums and stuff. SSL, again, to sort of make sure that the 1K area is being pushed. And then, probably really importantly, we're now looking at this. Now this piece to me is like, okay, let's find the mud, let's find the harshness, let's dial them both back. To me, this is where sort of the bass guitar is going to live. This is where the low end of the vocal is going to live. This is where all the presence of the vocal is going to live. and I don't need those in that harmonic guitar part, so let's just take it out. And basically that's it. And then on top, I sometimes love to just like add a pedal tone, one more thing, probably like in the tonal note of the scale, just staying where I feel like, okay, this is like home in the scale. And literally just having that with Decapitator and Kickstart in there just adds a bit of vibe to the track. When the chorus hits, it just jumps out. And that's literally it. That's the stack. That's how it works. Again, like what I'll sometimes do is track space the guitar. So basically when a vocal comes in, the guitar conducts slightly so that like every time I sing, the guitar and like the harshness of it can just come down a tiny bit. The human ear can't really tell, but there's a great plugin called Track Spacer by Wave Factory. I think it's Waves Factory. I think it's called. Correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, you can send a sidechain from the vocal to this plugin, and then the plugin, you put it on the guitar bus, and it will duck the guitars just a little bit every time the vocal comes in a really natural way. You can also achieve this just with a compressor. You just put a compressor on the bus, use your vocal sidechain, so like do another send from your vocal like this, and then just make sure there's no output from the send. So like this, send. And then if you put a compressor then on your guitar bus here, you'll then be able to take that send and put it on your compressor, sidechain, put the sidechain of the compressor onto that send. And it will just duck it down, and it's a really good way of like preserving the blend you've got with your guitars and the bass, but then just making sure the blend just ducks down a little bit instead of like changing the blend completely to fit the vocal. It's just a nice way of doing it. And if you've got pieces where the vocal's not playing, the guitars jump back to where they were in a nice way, so it sounds just bigger and fatter and more aggressive. Maybe we just look at the mix bus. There's nothing really going on here, guys, honestly. Just taking out a bit of mud like I normally do. Actually, I'm not even doing that. I'm just boosting the low end, boosting the high end. Again, anything under 80 is just mono. There's nothing wide under 80 because it just gets lost, really. And then we're just boosting the width by a fifth. And that is it. I was really excited, honestly, to jump into a question for the first time ever. I felt like a real streamer, and yeah, this was super enjoyable. We will jump into the new album next week, and I cannot wait for that. It's going to be really fun. Thanks so much to anyone watching this. Hope it was helpful, and yeah, I love doing this. And if there's anything specific that anyone wants, just throw a comment on there, and I can get it in the request folder and get it done. Cheers, guys. Take care.